Everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited today to have our guests on. Not only is it Mental Health Awareness Month, but we're going to be talking about burnout and perfectionism. And if you don't know, a lot of high performers, a lot of analytical people look at hard work sometimes and good work as being perfection, and it's detrimental to our well-being and our health and mindset. So today I'm really excited to have with us, not just with me, but with us, Dr. Shelly Bhowmik, MD, MPH, and she's the founder of the platform Wellness and the creator of the REST Burnout Prevention Method. She empowers women of color to enjoy professional growth and success without having to sacrifice personal health and well being. Can we say thank you so much to Dr. Shelley? Her work is based on the belief that mindset is medicine, a belief that she came to realize through her own journey that began at the edge of a subway platform. That doesn't sound like the best place, I'm just going to say, but then again, I'm rural. Dr. Bhowmik is a double board certified physician specializing in preventative medicine and lifestyle medicine. She earned her medical degree from George Washington University and completed her residency training at Johns Hopkins University. She's based in New York City and has had the privilege of serving organizations that include the Federal Reserve, the NBA, and Chanel. So everybody, welcome. I call her Dr. Shelley, but y'all can't do that. So y'all call her Dr. Bowman. Thank you so much for joining us today. What's one fun fact that is not in your bio
Ooh,
before we get started?
fun fact. I have sung under the Rockefeller Christmas tree in New York City. Yes.
See, see,
Yes.
some things. See, sometimes you just gotta ask, just in case you don't know. You have to ask. Okay, now, what do you mean you this realization came to you on a subway platform? Because in New York City, of all places, what was going on in there? I know we are supposed to be talking about, but now I'm like, I need to know. That's my first question.
Yeah. No, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. um, and yeah, this work that I do in corporate wellness to help women of color with, preventing burnout, building resilience, it has a lot to do with my own personal experiences with stress and burnout and mental health issues. Not too long ago, just a few years ago, I was in a pretty bad place. And the scary part was that I didn't realize it. I didn't know how bad things were until literally a Friday evening rush hour, standing at the edge of that subway platform, thinking about pushing myself over that edge. And that was a really scary moment. I hadn't experienced anything like that before. It really was scary, and I didn't see it coming. I think that's what was so scary about it, because on the surface everything looked fine. I was living in New York City, I was practicing as a physician, had a corner office on Fifth Ave, and all of that good stuff. But I clearly wasn't well. And so to step away from that edge, literally and figuratively, was like a journey in and of itself. And it was in that process of recovery that I came to realize that mindset is medicine. Your mindset is so powerful in terms of elevating your health and well-being. And so that's the message that I want to be able to pass on to other people, especially to other women of color, because I don't want them to end up at that same edge.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. So now you've gone through that experience, that your personal journey and experience. Um, I just want to take a minute to breathe, right? How then did you realize you were in burnout? Like at that point, you realized you needed help, but how did you realize you were in burnout and what help you needed to get?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And, for me, I mean, clearly I was beyond burned out by that point,
Yeah.
so I definitely want to make that distinction. But I think it would be helpful to go over the basic definition of burnout here. Because a lot of times I think folks get a little, it can be kind of confusing as to what it is. But so essentially in 2019, the WHO, they recognized burnout as a syndrome. And a syndrome isn't the same thing as a disease. A syndrome is usually it's like a group of signs and symptoms that happen together, but we don't really know the exact cause of why they happen together. That's a syndrome. Once we know the exact cause, then we can call something a disease. That's kind of the basic definition. But in any case, it's recognized as a syndrome. And in particular, there are three main characteristics to it. The first characteristic is decreased energy, so low levels of energy or exhaustion. The second is increased distance, mental distance from your work, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to your work. And the third is decreased professional efficacy. So not performing, at the top like you're used to. I know you mentioned perfectionism in the beginning, so that's definitely one that affects perfectionists. But yeah, those are the three major signs or symptoms of burnout. And the other thing too about burnout, the way that WHO has defined it, it's related to your occupation. So it's an occupational syndrome. It's a result of chronic workplace stress that's not well managed. So I think that's another, distinction to make. But, if I take a step back, my own personal definition of burnout is a lot more broad than that. It is when you act without intention. You are reacting to situations instead of being able to respond thoughtfully to situations. You're on autopilot and not in a good way. So when you're burned out, those are some of the signs and symptoms to look out for. And if left untreated, that it could become or develop into something more like depression, like anxiety, etc. So I hope that's helpful in terms of just kind of painting the broad picture of what burnout is.
Yeah. When we think about the lives of a lot of women specifically, and it's whether they're always working. It doesn't matter if they have a job outside of the home, they also have a job in the home. And the additional work, because it's additional work, right? How much more stress that has on them, and the emotional labor that they do, from child rearing, childbearing, caregiver, outside of children, um, is a lot for women. How can they go about, you know, monitoring themselves and understanding when they're getting close to that space to burnout rather?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you bring up a really good point. This the lines between our work lives and personal lives are so blurred because of technology, because of hybrid work now. It's We're not in the industrial revolution where we can clock in, clock out of a building. It's work has become a part of our everyday lives all the time. And so to separate, okay, is this stress related to work or stress related to my personal life, it almost becomes a moot point. But yeah, in being, to be able to identify it in your own, in your own personal life, I will say it's really hard. I'm a physician. I have years of medical education and training, and despite that, I still didn't realize what was happening until I got to that platform edge. And so what I tell a lot of folks is that you really need to be able to lean on others for support. I know you mentioned the REST framework, or the REST burnout framework, prevention, that framework early on in the intro. One of the steps in the framework is to seek support. And the reason why I really double down on that is because we need people during times of stress. And especially during times of stress, our vision is narrow. Our senses are so hyper focused on the stress that's in front of us that we lose sight of the bigger picture. So we need our friends and family around us to be able to be our eyes and ears and to let us know when when things look off, when things don't look well.
This this is really fantastic. I'm glad you brought in the working remotely and not always having access to work. And some people, even before was we work remotely, we still were always working and working a lot more than we needed to. What are in your rest framework, do you talk about how to set up barriers for from work and home, or especially for those that are in that are working remotely?
Yes, yes. I mean, setting up barriers, boundaries, it is definitely something that you have to be you have to be really intentional about. These are practices that you have to put into place, and it is a practice. You have to keep,
Yeah.
practicing them or doing them in order for it to really become a habit or part of your lifestyle. I was speaking to one colleague earlier who, talks about having it be a ritual, putting that shutting down the laptop, putting it away, in a separate place that is out of sight. Things like that can be really beneficial, and it is important to consider our physical environments, what we surround ourselves in, because that you know those environments can lead to health and well-being, or not. So being able to create those environments that are more nurturing, more healing, that is going to be key. And part of it is being able to put away the work when when your workday is done. So
Absolutely, absolutely. When you're talking to employers, whether it's their HR or benefits teams, I can't think of the other one, the employee benefits team. What are things that they're not aware, and they definitely at the executive level, because if nothing else, when we think about Ariana Huffington talks about her realization of where her health was, right? I think she's been one of the more public people to talk about that. Um, can we talk about to employers what they need to understand about burnout?
yeah, yeah, it's unfortunately there's still a lot of stigma associated with mental health, especially in the workplace. People are, not are afraid to let others know around them that they're not doing okay. And a lot of times what I'll tell companies is that psychological safety, being able to cultivate a culture of psychological safety within an organization, that is one of the most powerful things that you can do in terms of elevating the health and well-being of your organization at large. Because when people feel safe to be vulnerable in a group setting like the workplace, that's when you have folks who raise their hands when they're not feeling well, or not doing okay, and they do it earlier on versus when it's too late.
Yes,
Once when you can raise your hand earlier on, then there are ways that managers and higher ups can be able to help help an employee out. But if it's too late, then maybe that employee is ready to quit their job, maybe they're ready to leave, maybe they're who knows, take a medical leave. So being able to create that culture of psychological safety, that environment where it is okay to raise your hand and say, hey, I need some extra help here, I think that is really, really key.
and I ask this because a lot of organizations are laying off. Some of them, of course, overhired during the pandemic. Their work has slowed down, or they may not have had jobs for the people they hired anyway. They just wanted to swoop in and get some talent, however it may be. But especially for those that are understaffed right now, what what are one or two things they need? I know you talked about psychological safety. Their thing is their focus on revenue. And how do you, like, now they have somebody on medical leave, which means the team has shrunk in size. right? But the work is still there. How do you walk them through, like, hey, you have to do one, two, or three because it's just going to do X, Y, and Z if you don't?
Yeah, yeah, I think this is such an interesting topic, especially now, given recent layoffs in the tech industry, other industries. I was talking to some folks who are at a large tech company not too long ago, and this was after you know their own company went through a round of layoffs that was very public and well known, uh, and these employees, they didn't get laid off, they weren't part of that group, but they were talking about how they felt this survivor's guilt.
Right.
So in addition to feeling the stress of having extra work now added to your plate, there was this also mental or emotional toll of, wow, well, why did I get to stay but my friend didn't get to stay, my colleague didn't get to stay? They were dealing with those emotions as well. So I thought that was really interesting. You don't hear about that a lot, but layoffs, they not only affect the employees who are no longer with the company, they absolutely still affect those who are with the company. And I think this is where managers really come into play and are vital in terms of being like the frontline providers for organizations, because they have the power, the ability to be able to prioritize for the team, to be able to say, okay, you know what, these three initiatives we have to go full force on, we got to keep pushing these forward, but this other one that we were working on, let's table that for now. We'll, when we have more resources, we'll get back to that. Having a manager be able to help a team prioritize and set the direction, I think it's so key. And having that open communication too, between the manager, between the members of the team, so that everyone is in constant contact about how the workload is, what is feasible, what's not feasible. I think that open line of communication is really key. And again, that goes back to the psychological safety. When you feel comfortable being able to voice your opinions in a setting like the workplace, that you have to cultivate that culture in order to do so.
Absolutely. Yeah. The culture change and safety, psychological safety, I think a lot of executives miss that. And if you get a middle level manager that can provide it, and I always call them subcultures
Mm,
within their community. And people like, what do you mean subculture? Like literally talking to women, especially Black women and other women of color, they won't leave a manager, like they will forego like being promoted because of the psychological safety they have working with a certain manager. And I remember one of my friends, I was like, hey, you've been there for such, so what is that like? She was like, it's not a great company, but I have a really good manager. And I saw she took another job a few years later. I said, hey, you're over at such and such. She's like, yeah, my manager left, so I quit and went and found another job. And understanding sometimes the only way you're retaining that certain talent is because of that manager, and you're going to lose a lot of that talent because that manager, that mid-level, is the one that's creating a subculture with that psychological safety. And I think a lot of organizations miss that as well.
yeah, I think that's such a great way to put it. Creating those subcultures, creating that safety, that safe environment for teams. That is why managers, middle managers in particular, are like frontline providers, because they're having to not only care for themselves, but then care for those that they manage and oversee. And so being able to properly resource them, give them the tools that they need to be able to identify burnout in themselves, in their teammates, and then provide the resources to be able to then address that and prevent that burnout. I think that's all really, really key, and another reason why we need to support that middle level in particular.
So I know we're talking about mid-managed in the workplace. When you go into work with organizations, and I know it can change depending on their need, have you found mid-managers to be most receptive to your rest framework?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of folks are in need of resources when it comes to dealing with burnout. But they in particular, again, because they not only have to manage their own health and well-being, but they are given the responsibility of managing the health and well-being of others, and a lot of times not with enough resources or not with enough training. So any sort of tools that we can provide to that level in particular, I think is really important, to be able to keep everybody at the company happy and healthy and well. Absolutely.
Thank you for that. I just know they often get overlooked, like everything's driven down to them as far as work to be done to drive revenue in the organization, but not necessarily the resources sometimes to do the work, much less to be able to retain the talent. And they're really key to organizations, large and small. And too often they aren't viewed as that. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to discuss before we wrap up is return to office, and we're seeing a mixture of things. Executives who are driving and saying, "Oh, we need to return to office," and one of the favorite ones we were talking like Dropbox doing a return to office is like the premise of the whole company was not having to be in the office to access documents. Why are you one of the ones driving the return office? So that's a whole other brand issue right there. But on the other side of that, when you're looking at return to office, and I want to talk through the lens of women of color, right? Where we're seeing a lot of Black women, Indigenous women, Hispanic women, Latinas who are pushing back on return to office. Can we talk about mental mental health well-being that many of them are seeing the difference or experiencing by working remotely, that return to office may take away or impact?
Yeah. I've worked with several companies on this topic in particular, and it is tough. It is, especially after coming out of the pandemic, being having gotten used to the hybrid setting and working from home, to have to then go back to the office. It's not easy. One of the steps in the rest framework is to restore routine, and I think that step in particular is really important to focus on, in this kind of transition of returning back to work, returning back to the office. Restore routine is all about being able to really focus on those aspects of your lifestyle that are going to make a big difference in terms of your health and well-being. And in particular, the three that I tell individuals to really be mindful of, it's the nutrition, the physical activity, and the sleep that they're getting. So, how or what they're eating, how they're moving their bodies, how they're resting their bodies. Those three things in particular become really, really important to focus on, to establish some routines associated with those three lifestyle domains. That becomes very key to during a big transition, lifestyle transition, like going back to the office. And I should mention too, when I say to focus on your nutrition, physical activity, and sleep, I'm not necessarily saying that now is the perfect time to start intermittent fasting or sign up for a half marathon. If that's not everybody's starting point or baseline, and that's totally okay. What I care about though is the individual's baseline. What does that individual need to do on a daily basis in order to be healthy and well? For some individuals, it is going hiking on the weekends. For some individuals, it's taking a walk around the neighborhood in the evenings. So it's going to vary, but this is where tuning into your body becomes very key. Being able to do those things for your body that are going to be beneficial and good for your body. That's going to be very, very important when you have interruptions to your lifestyle, like returning back to work.
Thank you for that. Definitely don't sign up for a marathon from you may plan it out for a year, plan it out for a year.
Yeah, and look, some people that is their norm, that is part of their routine, and more power to them. But for a lot of people, it's not. So I wanted to, and that's okay. We're all at different starting points here. So
So if you have any questions for Dr. Shelley, but as we're before we wrap up, be sure you drop them in the chat. Now you do have a master class around your rest methodology. Can you tell people a bit about accessing it and any additional information you have?
Sure, sure. Yeah. So on my website, shellybhowmik.com, you'll see a button right on that homepage for the masterclass to be able to register and just get more information about all 9 steps of the REST framework. You can also just go directly to the URL, which is shellybhowmik.com/masterclass, which Michelle has so wonderfully put here for everyone to see. So, but yeah, being able to just learn more techniques about how to overcome burnout, manage stress, build resilience. That's what the REST framework is about. And I should mention too, REST stands for Revive, Strive, and Thrive. So it's a 3-part framework, which is why it's called REST. So
Revive, strive, and I'm
thrive.
missing thrive, thrive.
We want to
Guys,
thrive.
I'm hearing live like live and T, L and T are not the same letters. Like my mind went someplace else.
Well, we're doing a live right now, so maybe that's why.
Maybe. Let's go with that. Let's go with that. Um, the how can people find you and connect with you if they would like to learn more about your services? Maybe you have a book coming out. I don't know what Dr. Shelley's up to these days.
I don't know either, but my website shellybhowmik.com is a great place to reach out to me. Also on LinkedIn, I'm most active on that social media platform. So feel free to connect with me there too, and send me a note too, so I know that you were able to watch this live and um, you know were able to join us today.
I appreciate that. Everybody, this is Dr. Shelly Bhowmik. Thank you so much, Dr. Shelly. Thank you for coming on discussing burnout. So not only that we know, but our employers know, also our managers know, and so they can take care of themselves, but also help their individual employees through avoiding burnout. And if that's past that point, what do they need to be doing to help you through it? So, everybody, I appreciate it, Dr. Shelley. Everybody have a great week. I'll be back tomorrow with our new series called Built by Women. And we're talking to women engineers and scientists who are building and designing the US infrastructure. So from water, airports, rail. Yes, we do have trains. A lot of stuff in the US moves by train and people. So we're going to be having these conversations throughout the summer. So be sure you come and join every Wednesday at 6 p.m. on LinkedIn as well as YouTube. Built by Women is an X, not the word by, but you'll get it. So Built X, because Dr. Shelley knows why there's an X there.
Yeah, I know. That sounds so cool, by the way. I love that. I'm going to be tuning in. That sounds amazing.
Thank you so much. And tomorrow we will have Gladys Felix. She is originally born and raised in the Dominican Republic, had her engineering degree, civil. Hey. And she ended up moving to the US, her and her husband, who's also a civil engineer. And she was going to share about how, as an immigrant, she struggled to find a job. And now she's a licensed engineer in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So come and join us, especially if you're an immigrant, you're an engineer, you're trying to figure out how to navigate getting a job in the US. So we look forward. Thank you, Dr. Shelley, again, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks.